The easiest money you'll ever make is when you're working the least hard.
When it got down to the end of how we're going to portray himself, I said, look, we're going to tell the truth. We're going to talk about what you're doing right now.
I think a huge part of success is the ability to get yourself to do the shit you know you have to do, even when you don't feel like doing it.
It really is about being a sponge, learning as much as you can, and continuing to learn and develop those leadership traits.
When you're in jail, you're like the ultimate loser.
So why is it got to be so damn tough?
Welcome to the Toughness Podcast. I'm your host, Paddy Steinford, and today we've got a couple of high-flying business moguls on our show. First up, we have Jordan Belfort, best known by his nickname, the Wolf of Wall Street, but born in the Bronx, raised in Queens, so you know he is tough. He's the founder of Stratton Oakmont and managed over $1 billion at one point, lived a wild life, super high highs, lower lows than most of us can imagine, including a stint in prison, but since then has been incredibly successful. Best-selling author, the basis of an Oscar-nominated film, business advisor and investor. Welcome to the show, Jordan.
Thank you. Thank you.
Great to have you here. And alongside Jordan, we've got another super successful operator in business world who I'm lucky to call a friend as well as a colleague. Justin Kenna began his career in finance in Australia at companies the likes of Goldman Sachs, Deloitte, Ernst & Young, and then moved to the US to head up finance at Madison and Vine, a next-gen creative studio. Was poached to be the CFO for the number one esports brand on the planet, that's FaZe Clan, and is now CEO of GameSquare Inc. Welcome to the show, Justin, or JK as I will call him.
Thanks, Paddy. Good to be here.
Great to have you both. Your show, Jordan, has a wealth in it, a huge range of guests. We just had Shaquille O'Neal on the other day. We've had people from fighter pilots, NASCAR racers, and now we've got financial gurus. And your show also has a broad range of guests. I'm curious, right. The show is called The Wolf's Den, right?
Right, yeah.
It's probably hard. I don't want to put you on the spot here, but I'm gonna. Who's your favorite guest that you've had? Like the most unusual, outstanding guest that you've had on the show?
Well, he had me on there, so way to put him on the spot.
I actually have to say, of all the people, it's probably me. No. My solo podcast. No. I tell you, listen, there's a couple of podcasts that certainly stuck out for. They went viral. One of them was with the FBI agent that indicted me, became a very good friend of mine. And we speak all the time. So he was on my podcast, which was fabulous. And we went through all the stuff about what happened and his take on it. And then I guess the most famous podcast is one where I had this other allegedly top sales trainer on the podcast, Grant Cardone. He just made a total idiot of himself on my podcast and was like, he just completely thoroughly embarrassed himself, like knowing nothing about sales. He was supposedly teaching it to people. So that was one that people still to this day like talk about this podcast all the time. It's really funny because he just obviously has no idea what he's talking about. So that was a good one.
Awesome. I'm hoping that's not the way this one trends today, but I'm pretty sure.
I got great athletes. So I have like, Blake Snell, Juju Smith-Schuster. I enjoy the sports people because they, exemplify, especially for this, in terms of this podcast, mental toughness and fortitude. So it's always interesting.
Yeah. It's amazing how much it crosses over, right? Top performers in any field, whether it is in finance, business, sport. We've had emergency room professionals, obviously Navy SEALs. People who are at the top of their game in whatever industry tend to have this different approach or a different view on life, which is, I can't wait to dive into it here. One of the things that we're going to go through is for each of you some more challenging times along your journey to get to where you are right now. But as part of that, usually getting through those tough parts of your journey, it starts with a passion, like your ability to keep pushing through. And so I'm curious for both of you. I'll start with you, Jordan. Let's start there in terms of when in your early days, do you think you realized that you'd liked or had a passion, maybe even loved sales, business, and making money? When does that become a thing for you?
As far back as I can remember, like 5 to 6, 7 years old, I always wanted to have nice things. I'm not even sure why, but my parents, tell a funny story that we were on a family vacation. I didn't grow up rich or anything like that. I grew up relatively poor, and we were in some restaurant in Massachusetts, by the way, Cape Cod, and went to this restaurant. I ordered lobster on the menu, and I was like 7 years old. So they're like, "You can't have the lobster." Like, why not? But I think it really crystallized for me when I was 11 or 12 years old, and I started to realize that there were things that I wanted and couldn't have, like that my parents simply couldn't afford, and they were very honest with me. And I didn't understand that up until that point, like what was going on. Like what my parents are brilliant people, very, educated, both CPAs, hardworking, and yet had no money. And I was like, what is that? What's missing from the equation there with them at least? And why can't I have the things that I want? I aspired to want what I saw on TV with things like Dynasty and Dallas and shows like that of extreme wealth. And I always really wanted to go down that path, and all the beautiful women that you always saw with that. Seriously, that's, and I think that's what motivated me. Yeah.
Yeah.
Honest,
Right.
yeah.
I hope it's a similar detailed answer for you, JK. Like you studied finance back in Australia. Was it watching Dynasty and Dallas and all the hot women on that show that led you to study that, or was it something different?
Not quite. Mine's a little different. But no, I think for me, it's funny. I've talked about this a little bit, but growing up in the country, I think it gives you like a level of humility. And I actually remember I went to Melbourne when I was 17 years old, and I had I would have been younger. I would have been 15 or 16 years old, still at high school, and Dad took me down. I did an interview at Ernst & Young to do this traineeship, and on the invitation it said, "Come in business attire or your school uniform." And so this whole room that I walk into, they're all in suits and they're in their jackets from their private school. And I was in my school uniform, but I went to school in the country. So I'm basically wearing some grey pants and a green jumper. And I walked into this room, and I never felt more out of place. But I think from that day forward, for me, it was like I had this healthy chip on my shoulder, which was just I had this drive or ambition to always, prove that, not only can I do what you can do, but I'm going to be better than you are. And I think from that kind of country upbringing, it kind of gives you, I think, I steal this from the Richmond Football Club, Paddy, but we use this now at GameSquare, and that's being humble and hungry. And I think that's what it is. It's just this hunger to actually want to achieve more and work harder and prove your worth.
Love that. I've seen that summed up in a mathematical equation. You're always less than, but you always want more than. And it's a constant push and pull there. And it leads to my next question. This is a question I ask everyone on the show, and there's been some a broad range of answers, which is, what's toughness mean to you in your experience? Is it that thing where it's a matter of like, there's a chip on someone's shoulder, there's competitiveness? We know from some of the research as they analyze kids who are about to get drafted, one of the best predictors of whether they're going to overachieve according to their draft slot, according to what everyone thinks they're going to get, is competitiveness above and beyond everything else. Is that a thing in the world of finance or business? Is that a big driver, or is there something else that helps you deal with some of that shit you've got to go through?
What toughness means to me is, what do you do when things go wrong? I think there's a lot of people who talk about, being tough and act tough, but really haven't seen the wrong side of, whatever experience they're trying to achieve. Like, I've seen the highest highs and I've been through the lowest lows. And it's very difficult to really know how someone's going to react and, what they're going to do when they, the key is when you get knocked down, what you do, you get back. That's the old saying, right? But it's easy to say, not so easy to do. And I think that it goes beyond that. Like, I think what ends up separating people who are tough is they understand why they need to be tough. I think you have to go deeper. So, you could say, yeah, I'm tough. I want to be tough. And you can train toughness into someone. That's what I think the military does. And they train hard, fight easy, right? That's the adage of the Navy SEALs and so forth, right? But I see that people talk tough a lot, and then you watch them wilt and they run. I see this all the time in business. They run at the first sign of trouble. And I think that part of it is, number one, you just have to go through some of this stuff yourself, but really got to know your why. Why do you want to succeed? And, who's going to benefit if you do? Because typically it's the greatest motivators are not going to be yourself, your own fulfillment. So I always found myself going much further for people I loved and cared about, like my children. If it was about doing something to make sure my kids were okay, or that my family was okay, or a cause that I believed in was fulfilled, that I can get myself to do anything. It was just myself making money. Yeah, I can motivate myself, but it's much greater when it's someone else I love.
Yeah, really, really key point there. That point of who you want to do it for, or, who you're just even trying to get closer to, maybe not even achieving stuff, just getting closer to people, is usually one of the best predictors of whether people can push through tough times. And that's what I kind of mentioned before. JK, you want to add anything onto that?
Yeah, I mean, to add on to what Jordan was saying, I think for me, like mental toughness is really conviction through adversity. And what I mean by that, and sort of adding on to what Jordan was saying, it's not about when things are going great. And, for using sort of a public market company example where, you have sort of a report card every 3 months, right, where you're giving your financial results. So it's not about when revenue's looking great and the share price is running and everybody's happy and you look like a rock star, because the world just doesn't work like that every 3 months. I think it's about having conviction in what you're building, right, and in tough times and sticking to that. So it's understanding. I think taking advice from shareholders and people that have experience is really important. Taking everybody's advice and trying to make that work is not the right attitude either, right? It's about taking advice from people and using that to your conviction and what you think. And it's really sticking to your guns when things are going tough, right? And I think that's true, obviously, not only business, but in life. So for me, that's really what mental toughness is. It's sticking to your guns and sticking to your conviction even through adversity. And that's, I think, how you come out the other side.
No, I was about to jump in there and like a fantastic point. You also kind of, I don't want to leave this point aside because this actually ties into your journey, JK, of sometimes doing tough things is about when things are going well, taking another step up. Like you've moved from Australia, you were in a great job, you were set, you didn't have to leave Australia, right? And yet here you are jumping across the Pacific, taking a chance on jobs here that who knows whether this beast is going to chew you up and spit you out or not. And yet I assume that was a tough move, right? So how does the definition of like dealing with bad shit tie into that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's the old saying, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. But I think that's the case if you want to learn. And what I was talking about before kind of alludes to this, right? It's about not thinking you're the smartest person in the room. It's about being a sponge and learning and, being around people who've been through experiences, i.e., Jordan through his experience in the capital markets, his knowledge there is incredible. To be able to actually, have the ear of somebody who has that experience is really important. So I think it's being a sponge, working through the knowledge part and then being able to fit that into your own story and your own journey and sticking to that. And you're right. I mean, it has its challenges. I think moving from a different country, moving into new jobs, leaving FaZe Clan for me to come to GameSquare was a really big decision and one that a lot of people have probably been, were confused by at the start, but this is my journey. And now I'm building something that I'm really proud of with the people that I want to build it with. So I think, what doesn't kill you does make you stronger. And you learn from each experience and you learn more from the failures, I think, than you do from the successes. And one of our other sort of catch cries is to fail quickly, right? You're going to make a mistake and everybody does. Make those mistakes quickly. Don't sit around forever. You make your decisions and you move on and you move forward and you learn from the ones that don't work out.
Jordan, I hear you chuckling and a knowing nod and smile in the background there. What's your best example of failing quickly along the journey?
Yeah, I mean, I think I when I teach people about entrepreneurship, I always divide it into two categories. I call it failing elegantly. Part of failing elegantly is failing quickly. It also means failing cheaply and also maximizing on the lessons learned through failure, because it's through failure that we really learn a lot more. Ask any person that's really been there and done it in business or in life, and they'll tell you they've really got their greatest lessons when things weren't going well. So I think that's why I laughed when he said that failing quickly. It's that collapses into this idea of failing elegantly. And, what does that mean? Well, in business, it means, using other people's money, seriously, minimizing on financial loss for yourself and also minimizing on the time. I can't tell you how many times I've seen people in my own life who followed me in my journeys, and they were always 2 steps behind me because they stayed too long at the last thing. They refused to throw in the towel. I'm talking my much younger years when I, had some business that I started even before I got into the brokerage business. And one of them was in the meat and seafood business. And it was a terrible business. Just a shitty idea. It was stupid. And it was like never going to be anything great. And I kind of realized that and moved on and went to Wall Street. And the other guy's like, no, I'm in the meat business. I'm a meat salesman. I got to make this work. Looking objectively, not getting emotional. I think people tend to get emotionally invested in things and they stop stop thinking about things in terms of just like, hey, you know what? Whether it succeeds or fails, it doesn't impact me in the sense that I'm not my failures. I learn and grow stronger from my failures, and I use those to propel myself to success in the future, right? And it's an integral part of succeeding at business, because any business person that's never failed before is just lying. Everyone fails, at some point and makes mistakes, right? So that's a huge issue. I think another part also is just getting back to toughness is, I phrase it differently. I don't really use the word toughness, but I always say a part of just being a successful adult, because I deal with a lot of people and their kids follow me, right? In their teens and in their 20s. It's like the ability to get yourself to do the shit you have to do, even when you don't feel like doing it. Mm-hmm. So like so many people, they'll work really, really hard and put a ton of effort into the stuff they enjoy, because it feels good, but they can't get themselves to do this stuff that's not so enjoyable and they might hate. And I think a huge part of success is the ability to channel your effort, to be able to almost train yourself to do things that you don't like doing on day in and day out. If you feel like doing them, great, that's easy. But what about when you don't feel like getting up every single day and showing up and doing the shit you got to do? That to me is such an integral part of succeeding. Whenever you see someone that's really failing and it's a mindset issue, so often it's about that. They just can't get them. They won't apply themselves. Once a week they'll show up, but not on a daily basis. That's a huge part of success.
And do you feel like that's 100% spot on with what everyone has said who's come on this, and also a lot of the research around trying to predict it? But do you think, here's a curly one for you, do you think that is born or trained? Because here's the kicker, right? You've talked about emotional investment, which is like, I've got sunk costs in here. I bought a bunch of crypto and things went shit for a couple of months. And I have these feelings that make me want to act a certain way, right? I want to get away from the bad feelings. I want to feel calmer. Likewise, when you're sitting in Australia and everything's set up, you've got these feelings. This is cool. I'm sitting on the beach. I got my friends. Why the fuck would I leave this, right? So you've got emotions on both ends that are causing you to do actions that aren't probably good in the long term. Sure. And so do you think it's a natural inbuilt thing, like for yourselves, that like I kind of you learned it somewhere?
Yeah. So I think on anything else, it's not black and white. It's probably, I'm sure it's a combination of the two, but I think it's far more heavily weighted towards what you learn along the way. I think everyone's born with natural tendencies. Some people are born with natural tendencies to apply themselves and be able to stick to tasks, and they don't get distracted as easily. And I'm sure there's a genetic component to this, but I think a far greater portion of this is learned behavior based on root experiences. In other words, I think what happens with a lot of people is they have these root experiences early in life that form beliefs. And from those beliefs, they start taking actions based on those beliefs and acting in accordance with the system of beliefs they have. And those beliefs and the systems of those beliefs can empower you or disempower you. So, for example, often I'll hear people say, oh, I have a terrible fear of public speaking. I hate speaking. To even think about it's going to make me nauseous and vomit. And invariably, if you go back, well, why is that? Were you born with that? No, they weren't born with it. It will go back to like the third grade or something, where they had to stand up in front of class and give a speech, and they weren't really well prepared. They didn't have a natural ability to do it. So because of the lack of natural ability, no one gave them strategy to do it and coached them through it. Their first experience was terrible, and they felt bad about it. And that formed this belief of, I'm not a good public speaker. Once you have that belief will search the horizon and everything to reinforce itself, and you'll start acting in accordance. The next time you go up to speak, you'll feel nervous. You won't prepare. I don't like this. And you do even worse. And their belief starts to reinforce until it almost becomes a conviction, like, I hate public speaking, right? Mm-hmm. Versus someone like myself, where the first time I got to speak, the words just flowed out effortlessly. And I love what I was talking about. And I was like, wow. And it felt great. And I started to say, wow.
Now you can't get the microphone off it.
You're right. That's it. You get it. So it gets to the point where over time, you just feel it's who you are. So that, I think, is so much of it.
The number one fear of human beings on this planet is public speaking. Above you and death. bleeding, all
Right.
that sort of shit.
Yeah.
Lucky you didn't have any of it.
I have a fear of not public speaking. I have a fear of not public speaking.
not speaking enough.
Exactly. I love to talk public. I'm most comfortable when I'm talking publicly, and the bigger the crowd, the better. But that was something that was natural in the beginning, but learned along the way because it felt good. And I think that more people, if they were not throwing so much of this is like a kid goes out there to play soccer. And he has not great, and this is a natural ability, definitely plays a role in that here, but they're not coached correctly. They have a bad experience. They feel bad about it. They will laugh at. And so the next time they do it, they don't want to do it. It feels bad. Mm-hmm. And that's like this reinforcing cycle of beliefs is so important. It's not to say that natural abilities matter, because they both matter, but it's a huge issue.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, what I was going to say before is that I think certain people have this something in them where they naturally have more drive and they want more and they have more ambition. But I think to the second part of it, Patty, you were saying before, do you think you can be trained? I mean, of course you can, but that comes down to a mentality and a willingness and a want to learn rather than quick fixes. Because a lot of this stuff isn't a quick fix, right? If you want to be able to get up and be a leader and speak on a certain subject, you need to do the work and you need to understand, your work and what is behind that before you can actually, really deliver a message. And I think that's kind of a piece that, might be missing a little bit these days with this sort of social media culture and everybody wanting sort of instant gratification. I think there is a lot there that is around that willingness to want to learn, because as I was talking to before, I look at, business leaders that I've had, and I've been very lucky to work with some really impressive leaders, the amount that I've been able to learn from them. And I think it really is about being a sponge, learning as much as you can and continuing to learn and develop those leadership traits. I don't think any of these things are easy, even to people that may have that innate ability internally.
Yeah, I think your point there, particularly about the social media thing, is that it's rife these days. I'm sure both of you get hit probably more than I do on LinkedIn or Insta or whatever, and people are like, "Oh, I want to get to where you go. Tell me how to do it," right? And my quick response is, "Look, my path is weird and winding, and you don't want you probably wouldn't be able to repeat it. But more importantly, I don't think you understand all the shit that happened." I'm working with the 76ers, and I'm working with the Red Sox, but you don't understand the 8 years of shit that I had to swim through.
You didn't just walk into the Boston Red Sox and them give you a cap and a clipboard and say go for it.
Come on in,
like that.
Exactly. Yeah, you both touched a little bit there on the knowledge of particularly Jordan. You mentioned having bad experiences early that can kind of shape people. We had Denise Shull on, who's the basis of the character in Billions, the performance coach on that show. And she talks about this thing called anticipatory affect, which is it's a fancy word for saying, I'm imagining what that's going to feel like, and I'm making my decisions based on what it's going to feel like, rather than being objective, right? How much is your job as an advisor? So let's switch lanes here from theory and psychology to actually your practical business work. Jordan, as an advisor or an investor in a company like GameSquare, how much of your role is to say, look, here's some cash, go kill it and pay me back? Or how much, if you're going to divide up the pie, how much of it is to get with someone like Justin and say, look, here's something, it's rough, but hold on. Or you got to get out of that early.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think GameSquare is probably the best example, because when GameSquare, my brand is really the attraction, because it's such a message to market match for you. My core fan base is 16 to 30 years old, males, skewing male, about 70-30. So I think that, what I bring to GameSquare is probably a lot. I'm happy to give Justin advice and stuff, but I think Justin has got his head on pretty straight with business at this point. Most of my clients, though, when I am coaching them on business stuff, a lot of it, there's always two sides to success. We live in a world of duality. There's a yin and a yang, right? There's up, there's going to be down. There's yes, there's no. There's always two sides to every coin. So in business, you have, the inner game of success, and then you have the outer game, right? The outer game is all your actual strategies. And, that could be sales strategies, marketing, just entrepreneurial strategies. And then there's the inner game, which is mindset of success, right? And they both matter. I mean, everything starts up in your mind, right? Obviously. And that's from, where you develop an intention, then you want to go out and take action to make that intention become a reality. And I think what happens with a lot of people is they sometimes get sabotaged up in their own mind. There's things that they have that are literally holding them back from success, whether it's limiting beliefs, the inability to manage their state, low standards, a lack of a clear vision for their own future. So when I'm working with someone, I try to define, I try to get these core elements lined up for them. Make sure they're clear on their vision. They don't have any limiting beliefs about themselves or business in general that would hamper them. Because what happens is the beliefs are these sort of silent killers of success. I have certain clients, they just make perpetually bad decisions. They make really bad decisions. I have one client in particular, and he's constantly just really doing things where I'm I cannot believe, why would someone do this to themselves? They're literally forcing themselves to take, 3 steps backwards for every 2 forward. And they're successful because they're in a successful industry, right? And it's very difficult, to you cannot be lying by saying you can wave a magic wand on these people and just make them change overnight. It's not an overnight thing as much as we'd like to think it is, but it's about constantly, intervening on someone and then pointing it out and trying to give them evidence, real world, here's what you did. Here's what tough love constantly, right? And then eventually you see they start making better decisions. I mean, that's the only way, but so much of it happens up here in their mind.
Yeah. JK, flipping to you on that point, how much of your approach to, when I first heard about some of your moves, I think you mentioned it earlier, your move from FaZe Clan to GameSquare a little bit, but even from the normal finance and advertising into FaZe Clan, they're a little bit left turns and unexpected, right? And particularly even the business direction of FaZe Clan and the emphasis on that brand side that Jordan mentioned. Yeah. It's a little bit of a different approach, right? How do you get to the point where where you decide I'm going to swim against the grain versus we're going to do what everyone else is doing? That seems to be a bit of a trend of yours. Is that fair?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, I think that for me, it's an interesting one, right? Everybody always talks about 5-year goals and 10-year goals and where you're going to be and all these types of things. My whole thing has always been do the work, get myself in a position that I can achieve. And I have this, and I call it ruthless pursuit of short-term goals. And that's what I'm about, is a ruthless pursuit of short-term goals opens up doors to bigger and better opportunities in the future. That's not to say that, for example, I'll talk about GameSquare. I have a vision for where GameSquare is going to be in 5 years' time. Now, are we going to be there? Maybe, maybe not. Will we achieve the things I want to achieve? I'd like to think so, but is it going to look exactly like what I think it's going to look like? It's not going to, right? There's variables, and you need to, even what Jordan was talking to before, as strong as you are in your convictions, you need to have the ability to pivot, right? And my whole thing has really been about backing myself in and having ruthless pursuit of short-term goals. So I try to not overthink things too much. I have a vision for where I want to get to, but if I do everything really well in the short term, the medium term takes care of itself. And that's kind of my attitude. And so, from FaZe Clan and even moving from FaZe Clan into GameSquare, I did that. And I gave, FaZe Clan 3 years of ruthless pursuit of short-term goals that I think has been, I'm very proud of and has been a contributor to the success and growth of FaZe Clan and where they sit today. And, for me personally, I had an opportunity to come over and, at 36 years of age, be the CEO of a publicly listed company. And, for me, that was exactly that. I'm not in this to, be at a basketball game with a celebrity or in this to, walk around and talk about how amazing FaZe Clan is. I'm in this to actually grow a business and build value for those who believe in me. And I had the opportunity to do that and come over to GameSquare. And to be frank, it's been an incredible experience thus far, and we've got a lot of growth ahead of us.
Love that ruthless pursuit of short-term goals. If you haven't trademarked it already, I'm about to as soon as this finishes. I want to grab that and talk about this. One of the aims that started this podcast was I am still part of the advisory board for human performance at the Army. And I had some guest speakers and they were like, could you curate something that might help us talk about, number one, trying to get our operators and our personnel engaged with people who will help them with their inner game. And number two, actively give some tips on that. And the number one really was the key. And so I want to switch back to you, Jordan, and your, one of the most famous lines of, sell me this pen, but I want to flip it a little bit. And you kind of do this when you talk about your coaching anyway, but I'm curious to say, what would you do to sell to someone the idea that why they should have an advisor or a performance coach or a therapist for their inner game? Like, how would you sell that to someone to say, look, if you want to be as good as I have been in business, you want to be as successful as Justin is in business, you need someone to help you with your inner game. How would you sell that?
Well, first I'd start asking them questions on stuff. I want to find out, what they're doing, how they perceive their level of success right now, what they think their strongest aspects are naturally, what their weakest points are. I try to find out what's bothering them, what their main pain points are, right? I want to find out the biggest thing is going to be is trying to find out what is really keeping them up at night in terms of success, and then trying to basically get them to just really see. One of the biggest mistakes people make with this is they try to sell things to people without really understanding what the prospect even needs. And they use their own map of the world to just assume what they think someone needs. And very often you're wrong, because people are really all very different, and they have very different, belief systems about things, and what makes one person thrill will make another person miserable. So I'm very much into like this intelligence gathering and trying to identify at the highest level what someone's primary and secondary pain points are. What's really keeping them up at night in terms of their own level of success, and this is what related to the inner game in terms of the inner game of success. And once I have that identified, and I feel like I've asked enough questions to really ferret that out. And as I'm doing that, it's really important. I don't just do that and listen. Like, I don't ask a question and just sit there. I'm very active. Like when I listen to people, I'm like, yep, got, yep. Is a big part of communication is how you listen to people, and not just your grunts and groans, but your body language. It's a cohesive package it's called active listening. And the idea is that when you ask someone questions and they answer you, you listen in a way that builds massive rapport with them. So you can either be the grand inquisitor asking questions and they hate you. Like, what the hell are you asking me questions for? Like, none of your business. Or like the trusted advisor, that's one that really cares about them and you really want to know. So if I say to you, so what's your biggest pain point right now? You say, screw you. Or I can say to you, so what's your biggest pain? What's really keeping you up at night right now? And so there's nuances here in communication. So if you do this the right way, you ask the questions in the right order with the right tonality attached, and you listen actively. By the time that you're done asking the questions and you know what you need to know, and you say, listen, well, based on what you said, the program I offer is literally a perfect fit for you. Let me tell you why. And now I'm going to tailor my presentation to directly match onto their pain points and what they do. And then I'll end that by asking them, and here's how you get started. Let's get started right now. And I make it very easy to get started. And there you go,
And that approach actually also helps you learn more about the person as well, right? The active listening and engaging. And rather than somebody, especially in those situations, I feel like people give you this story about themselves, and you hear what they want you to hear, rather than, as you said, once you start to poke and prod. And
you're Australian, right?
Yes, I am.
He is. He's lost a bit of his accent.
I've been here so long.
I'll tell you a great story from Australia. So I was paid a lot of money back in 2010 by some psychologists in Australia, and they wanted to dissect the straight line system, what I teach, why it works so well. They wanted to make it into a behavioral model and so forth. And they sat me in a room for like 3 or 4 days and gave me all these different tests and drills and critical incident scenarios, which is a fancy way of saying role playing a psychologist, right? And, I did everything from Rorschach ink blot tests to like literally role playing. And one of the role plays was a CEO of an Australian-based dairy company. He's an actor, the guy. But he played this guy. He was really good, by the way. And he really knew his shit. And they handed me a dossier. They said, okay, here's this Australian milk company in the middle of the Gold Coast somewhere, and they've been in business for 50 years, family-owned company. They want to go now and expand into China and blah. There's a whole story. And he said, you got 15 minutes to go through this and convince him now. I was supposed to be an investment bank and convince him to switch to use my bank, okay, as one of their investment banks to raise money and, advise them, right? They say, you got 15 minutes to analyze this dossier and then close this guy, the CEO. So they gave me the dossier, whatever. Long story short is that, because a lot happened, but like they gave me 15 minutes. I ended up taking an hour and a half because I prepare for what I don't believe in just going off of the cuff, right? But they called the CEO and they had all the cameras and lights on, the psychologists in every corner with their pads looking. And this guy comes in and I start going through, giving him a straight line presentation. And after 25 minutes, after the fourth time I asked him for the order, he said no the first 3 times. He said, fine, I'll do it. And he starts laughing hysterically. I'm like, and I closed the guy. He says, he's laughing. And the psychologists are roaring in laughter. I'm like, what are you guys laughing about? They're like, we paid him to say no. He was told that under no circumstances can he say yes. He has to say no. And you still close the guy.
He's not getting paid now.
He's not getting
but he said yes.
And I still close the guy. Right? And so you can see it on YouTube, by the way. The whole thing is on YouTube. They actually taped it and I put it on YouTube many years later. It's on there. It's a real story. And a lot of it came down to the fact of all the questions I was asking the guy. And by the time I was done, I had identified his problem so perfectly. And he believed I was an expert because I positioned myself as an expert. So there's all these things that go down when you're communicating with people. And I think the biggest thing is that you must be perceived as an expert in your field. If you're perceived as a novice, people are just simply not going to answer your questions honestly or forthrightly. They're not going to certainly want you to be the one that solves their problem. We seek out experts to solve our problems, eliminate our pain. So it's a crucial aspect of selling anything.
Yeah. And I think, so I heard two main things there. One is be perceived as an expert, but 2, earlier you said they've got to feel like you care. There's got to be a connection there, right?
Of course, right.
You did that little switch of tone, which I'm sure we'll be able to highlight in post-production. But your voice change, you could be a psychologist. That was freaky how easily you slipped into that mode. Speaking of psychologists and their term for that critical incident stuff, I want to throw to you now, JK, because one of the other things that is common on this show, I've mentioned some of the guests. We've got, NBA, NFL, MLB, actors, comedians, fighter pilots, Navy SEALs, people who, like, if you screw up in the next 5 minutes, you're toast. Someone might die in some cases, or you're going to lose a $10 million contract, or you lose a Super Bowl, like all sorts of massive things are on the line. I'm going to suggest that when you're pitching to an investor that could influence your bottom line, firstly with just a capital injection, or someone of Jordan's standing in terms of brand reach, etc., there's some shit going on inside you as the presenter, right? Or, in a meeting where you're making a big decision, Jordan, to actually invest. What's that like for you? Did that get better for you? Like, tell us about some of those edge of your seat moments that you come across as the CEO or as a CFO.
Yeah, totally. I think the first point is to remember that no one is dying in the process, right? So you're not a surgeon, and at the end of the day, obviously you want to make people money who are investing in you and believe in you, but we're running a gaming company and that should be fun. So we work very hard, but trying to actually, make it fun. That I think what Jordan said, in the previous question was spot on, and that's being an expert in your field and having people feel comfortable in that. So I always revert back to, it was about 3.5 years ago, and we were going to raise money for FaZe Clan at that time. The gaming and esports industry was not what it is now. And actually, there wasn't a huge amount of money being invested in the space. And we had this, I'd call it a business loosely. At the time, it wasn't much of a business. It was a brand with a big social media following, but a lot of question marks on how you actually monetize that. And Greg Selko and I actually went and we did a roadshow on the East Coast, and we pitched on Wall Street to a bunch of suits. And to be quite frank, we walked in there and told the story. And that experience, now looking back on that, really shaped my kind of experience around being an expert and needing to know absolutely everything about your business. And I think there's no better way of knowing every single thing about your business there's no better way than pitching your business to very intelligent people who are giving you their money, right? Because they're going to ask you so many different questions. And I think from there to now, I raised roughly 60 million in debt and equity at FaZe Clan. We've raised, I think, 11 million so far at GameSquare. It definitely gets easier. You feel more comfortable after doing it, for sure. But I think it also just comes down to knowing literally everything about your business. And, when I went in to pitch FaZe Clan at that point, I believed in our story, but there are a lot of things we still need to work out as a business, right? There are a lot of question marks. And I think it's also down to winning the crowd and the credibility, but also not trying to answer every question perfectly. If you don't have every single answer, being honest about it and coming back to it. But I think to answer the question, Paddy, I think it gets a lot easier the more you do it. You feel more comfortable. I think the key to it is understanding your business and understanding, your content to be able to actually instill trust and faith in others for them to give you their money, to believe in you and the growth of your business.
Yeah, love it. I mean, knowing, you said again, we're going back to over the same ground there, but knowing your shit first and foremost, being credible,
Sure.
and then getting the reps, which allows you to continually know your shit better and better, because people will ask you questions that you may not have been ready for. If you're honest, you go and find the answer. You don't try and make it up.
Totally. And being thrown in the deep end, I think for me was probably the best thing, right? Like you can prepare, and I'm, similar to Jordan, I prepare for meetings and for big pitches and presentations like no other. I'm not going to be outworked. But, if I look back now on that pitch, I didn't know what to expect, right? Walking into a sea of vultures in suits that, want to know everything about the industry and how you monetize every little morsel of it. And at that point in time, we hadn't figured it all out. So being thrown in the deep end was a really good learning curve. And then from there, really, as you said, honing your own skills and continually getting those reps in.
Yeah, I'm curious for each of you. This is totally side note, but we worked out early days when I was in MLB and we were doing a bunch of hours because there's like 200 athletes in the system, that if we were delivering an hour on any given day of spring training camp, for example, we would have to do 8 hours of prep. That was our optimal. Like we fucking nail it if we do 8 hours for 1 hour. Do you guys have any idea what your ratio is in terms of like being able to crush a presentation? I normally spend X amount of time on the prep phase.
For me, I mean, there's a difference between an initial presentation and then like I'm like one of those people that presents the same information like all. But what I have is like it's like people want the straight line system, right? So it's really not a great example because like I've been teaching this system to people all over the world for like 30 years, and there's just this voracious appetite for it because it works. It really works, right? So like when it comes to that sort of thing, right, I will literally like not prepare at all because it's so unconsciously competent for me. But it's imagine like what you do best in your life, having to present about that. So if it's just that, well, then I'm just whatever. It's like I show up and it's perfect every time. But for example, if I get hired by a company, and a good example is a crypto deal I just saw, and it's a payment platform, like very similar to a PayPal for cryptocurrency. I spent 60 days, probably, 6 hours a day just on putting the deck together to make it so perfect, because I know that if I do that, everything else is simple. Like I think what people often do is they forget the certain steps, is like these foundational steps. Like, okay, how do like, wow, look, we came back with failure. Leonardo DiCaprio played him in a movie and Marty Scorsese directed it. And now it's a global brand. Well, guess what? When I first tried to write the book, The Wolf of Wall Street, it sucked. The first few drafts were it was like I wrote 3 pages and I was in jail at the time. And my bunkmate was Tommy Chong from Cheech and Chong. And he was like, oh, yeah, this really sucks. Like, oh, thanks, Tommy. Tell me what you really think, right? and what it was, I stumbled upon a book called Bonfire of the Vanities, and I used it like a textbook, and I taught myself to write. But I spent more than 10,000 hours teaching myself the foundational skill that was required to achieve what I wanted to achieve. And I think what people often forget is that typically in most businesses or endeavors in life, there's gonna be something that you got to really learn. There's this actual skill, and in the absence of that skill, all the desire in the world is not going to matter. So it's like the intersection of desire, hard work, and skill. So unless you want to take the time to learn a skill set, then you're screwed, right? So I think you have to get honest with yourself. Like, what the first step in achieving any goals? Set the goal, obviously, right? But also, what do I need to learn? Any specialized skills or info I have to learn here to succeed and get what I want? If you don't do that, you're going to be working 10 times as hard and probably not going to achieve what you want in life.
Yeah. A lot of people set goals, and a lot of people set goals with, here's my outcome, here's what I want at the end of it. They don't think much about the input, right? What you got to put in, what you actually got to learn and build in yourself. JK, sorry, I cut you off again.
Totally. No, Fatty, I'm used to it. Mine is similar. I mean, my preparation time has reduced because I know the subject matter
again and again, right? After a while, say right.
Exactly. So I think that's the key here is, there's no, I think, exact time of, input to get the output. But once you know your subject matter and you are that expert, it becomes a lot easier, right? It's like, because you're selling something that you believe in and you're passionate about, it sounds corny or very easy, but it's the truth. And, once you build something that you believe in, it's then very easy that relates to people, and that comes off when you present and people can understand that.
Authentic.
So, for sure, mine varies a little bit. Obviously I put in more time when we're doing different commercial deal pitches, or you're meeting with different people that you haven't before, or taking the time to understand their knowledge of this industry, right? It's a very new industry. So the education level there is very different. So for people that actually understand the industry, you can kind of jump straight in. For those that don't, it can be at a higher level to try and get them that knowledge. But yeah, look, I agree. I think it's really about knowing your subject matter, and then that comes across.
Yeah, right, for sure. Switching modes here, because you talked a little bit. So we've talked about preparation there, right? But that came off the back of talking about being thrown in the deep end. And Jordan, I mentioned in the intro, you were thrown in the deep end into a situation most of our listeners, I'm sure there'll be some exceptions, but most of our listeners haven't been to jail, haven't served time. And so you went in there and served, it was more than a year, right? Almost 2 years?
Almost 2 years, yeah.
And so tell us about that experience, if you're okay talking about it. Like,
sure,
that's a tough experience, right? What was the hardest thing for you going in there? That it's pretty hard to prepare for some of that stuff, right?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I wasn't in a penitentiary. So like I wasn't terrible. I wasn't worried about dropping a bar of soap in the shower. So it wasn't like that bad, okay? But jail's jail, and it still sucks, right? And it was awful because, I was separated from my children. And it's just like, when you're in jail, you're like the ultimate loser. You are. You're a loser because you've lost in the game of life. You've lost. You did whatever it is you lost. You've temporarily lost. And now you're locked up with no civil rights. It's terrible. It's like you can't imagine what it does to someone's psychology, because it's like there's just no way around. You can't rationalize your way out of it. You are a loser. And, and the world goes on without you. And I think what happens to a lot of people is they go into jail and they allow that to become who they are. They allow the experience to define them, versus for me, what I did is I used it to propel me to greatness. And it might sound odd, but you take the hand that you're dealt, or you dealt yourself, and you move forward. So, for me, I remember there was this moment in jail when, Tommy Chong, who was my bunkmate, right? And he said to me, you have to write a book. Because I was telling him stories at night, and he was rolling on the floor. He goes, I thought they were bullshit. And my wife Googled you, and it's all true. I can't believe you lived this life. And ironically, I didn't think my life was that crazy because it was my life. And I'm like, really? You think my life is? It's like, I'm Tommy Chong, and I think your life is crazy, right? Right? And in that moment, I made a decision, right? To start. I said, all right, I'm going to give it a shot, right? And then it was just a terrible struggle. I was a terrible writer. I couldn't write anything well. It was really boring to read my writing. And then I had this second incident where I stumbled upon this book. Oh my God, this is how I want to write. And I literally taught myself to write, like word by word, taught myself to become what I think most people say is a very, very good writer now. Okay. In terms of I can write as good as pretty much most great authors, right? Not like the best of the best, but I'm up there. Okay. I believe that in my heart. I was walking around the prison for about a year and a half with my books and writing under my arm. And I kept saying to myself, everyone else here is wasting their time. I'm not. I'm going to come out. I want to show everybody here. And I was it was a strategy I was doing on purpose. I was doing it to myself, knowing I'm kidding myself. I'm saying, I'm going to write a bestseller. I'm going to take this whole thing. They don't know. They're wasting their time. They do nothing. I'm doing something. I'm improving myself. So I used that time away to improve myself, to give myself, I exited prison with a skill set that few people have. I don't have ghostwriters when I write my books. I write my books myself. So that skill I developed, I exited a much more powerful person in terms of the ability to communicate. I always had the natural born ability to speak, but not write. That skill allowed me to achieve everything else going forward. Now, would have I been successful in it? Yeah, I would have been successful anyway. It was in my nature. But that skill, it was that moment in jail, not allowing to say, I am the mistake of my past. That's the big one. I'm not the mistake or the mistakes of my past. I'm the resources and capabilities that I gleaned from my past mistakes. So every mistake you make, if you can look at it that way, you grow stronger. You learn from it. You develop muscle. So I exited jail now with the ability to write really well. Ethics now really back in line, knowing I'll never do something wrong again. Like that, I learned my lesson on that regard. And I set myself up for massive success. And then I came out and wrote the book the first year, working 18 hours a day, hiding away in a small little apartment. And the rest is history. So like you said, people say, oh, you work for this team and that team, and they don't know what the blood, sweat, and tears. Well, the blood, sweat, and tears that went into my thing was literally countless hours of teaching myself to write and then writing that book and going to jail.
Well, I mean, that's an amazing turning shit to gold kind of story, right? It's the alchemy of life, being able to take some shit stuff and make good stuff out of it.
It was on purpose, though. It was on purpose. It wasn't an accident.
Yeah, so I'm curious about that because I know we're starting to get up against time, but one of the things that we talk about here, as well as being able to find an advisor, like formally potentially for your inner game, sometimes it comes through heroes that we have, either people that we see, we read their shit, like you found this book that kind of shaped how you wanted to talk in writing, or we have actual advisors in business or a coach or a parent or something like that, right? Was it your deliberate intent in jail to flip the shit and turn it into gold? Obviously, people want to do that, right? But you were deliberate and specific and crafted about it. Like, did you have someone who pointed you in the direction besides Mr. Chong?
So I'll say this, that Tommy Chong probably told Tommy's a really nice guy. He was not one to keep to himself. He gave advice to a lot of people. He probably told 30 people that to go write books. I'm the only one that actually taught themselves to write and wrote a book. Everyone else, so I think the difference is, I always say is so much of it is about like this ability to get yourself to do the shit you don't like doing. And a lot of people, they just cannot get themselves. They don't have that it's discipline to do all the stuff that happens before the glory.
Do you have a trick for that? How do you make yourself do that?
Well, it's not a trick. What it is, it's a set of values and beliefs I have about success. I fully believe that's an integral part of success. Like in my mind, I don't see any other way. So like if I want to achieve success, I have a firm belief that success requires preparation, hard work. The easiest money you'll ever make is when you're working the least hard. You make most of your money when you're hardly even working. All of the hard work goes into before you become successful. And this is what people don't get. Like they feel like, oh, he's an overnight success. Yeah, after 6 years of hard work, right? So it's like once you're succeeding, making money I made the most money hardly working. You know, 20 million there, that happens now. It's like unbelievable. I can print money now after years and years and years of blood, sweat, and tears, right? Mm-hmm. But I enjoy that. Like in my mind, I've linked up. Like to me, I believe that part of the journey is the hard work and like the not succeeding. So like when I'm not getting what I want, I'm not negative about it. I'm like, I'm one step closer. It's not a game. It's like, it's a belief I have, a tacit belief that this is how you succeed in life. You do these things and you will succeed. And what I don't do, and this is a big problem for many people, many of your listeners, I bet, is that many people don't truly believe they have what it takes to succeed. It's not fear of failure that stops them. It's that when they play the movie out, they're like, I don't know if I really are going to succeed. So why should I do all the hard work? Like, I really believe that if I do the hard work, I'm going to succeed. Doesn't mean it's going to happen, but I believe it. And when you believe that, your brain will say, all right, well, I might as well do the hard work because I'm going to get the payoff.
And it goes back, Paddy, to your point before that a lot of people worried about the output, right, rather than the input. It's the input that the output will take care of itself. Like what you're saying, Jordan, in terms of you do that hard work. A lot of these people are making money when they're successful, but it's the work and it's the input that actually gets you there. So similar to my ruthless pursuit of short-term goals, don't worry about the output so much. Actually put in the work, then, it'll take care of itself.
Yeah. And is that either the ruthless pursuit of short-term goals or that I know that that's a paraphrase almost, might be accidental, of 49ers coach who used to say, I think it was Bill Walsh used to say, the scoreboard will take care of itself. Like everything around the West Coast offense was, let's get 4 yards at a time. Because if we do that 100 times in a row, we score every time. So you get a first down every time, you score, the scoreboard takes care of itself. Just get 4 yards. Getting back to your ruthless pursuit of short-term goals and any other parts of your philosophy in terms of how you've approached this fantastic career to date, who are the heroes or the people you borrowed from? Like, was there someone along the way that helped guide you? Or is this just you've taken bits and pieces of some of the people you've been underneath or alongside?
Yeah, for sure. I've had a number of different mentors along the way, and I've been very lucky to do so. In Australia, working within Big Four in investment banking, and then I was running a strategy group at one of the Big Four banks, and the CMO at the time, she was one of the best leaders that I've ever had, but also encouraged me to look at opportunities overseas, and was one of the reasons that I took the leap and came to LA in the first place, which was a big leap at the time. I was very young to be running a strategy group at a Big Four bank in Australia. I was living in Bondi with a great group of friends and enjoying life. But I took a pay cut and came over to the US, and, at that point in time, really didn't have much here at all. And it was sort of her advice that helped me. And while that can be perceived as a risk, it's a pretty educated one, right? Like I'm taking a risk, but if it doesn't work out, I can go back to Australia and I'll have a good job and I'll have my mates there and life goes on. But the upside of that is, learning to work in a new market, which has so many greater opportunities. And so, I think for me, I'm very lucky that I've been around a lot of really impressive leaders within business, but also, I guess, I've had the ability to be a bit of a sponge as well. And I think that's important. You can be lucky enough to be in the room with, people who have that experience, but you have to be willing to stop and listen and try to extract as much of that as you can. And being lucky enough to do so, that's definitely really helped me.
Yeah, and that's that humble and hungry at the same time, right? You got to be in the room, but you got to be willing to be doing the work, pick up on what they put out there and run with it. I want to finish with usually the last way we tie things up is where to from here. So we'll start with you, JK. It's a great journey so far, but compared to the two older blokes on the show, you're still spring chicken in terms of your business career, right? Young,
I feel it.
Young. That's probably because of your days back in Bondi. Young CDO,
Right.
Young CEO, still a long way to go. Obviously, very invested in your current role, and it's a great spot to be in. What do you hope for the future as you obviously expand and esports is taking off? What do you hope for your future, both yourself, for the industry, and for people who might be listening to this show?
For sure. So I think for me, leaving FaZe Clan wasn't an easy decision, but it was the right decision. And definitely not something I did lightly, but I now look at it and my goal is the same, and that's to build the biggest gaming and esports company in the world. For me personally, I want to be able to set up a life for my family that I can, support them. And that's also my extended family and family and friends back home. I want to be in a position to be able to do that. So that definitely motivates me. And, as you kind of go along this journey and you have people that believe in you, whether it's advisors or investors or people that are, giving up their hard-earned money because they believe in you, I take that very seriously. And I want to make sure that every single person that's put 1 cent into this company gets a lot back. So I think that we're really well positioned, not trying to look too far ahead, but, continuing to do the right things and build this company the right way. And I'm really confident that we'll get there.
Love it. Touching on what Jordan mentioned before about really knowing your why. It helps to push through some of the long, hard nights and early starts, 5 a.m. in the sauna, as you mentioned before we started recording. Jordan, over to you. What about your story has evolved? Obviously an incredible journey that most people are more familiar with than mine and Justin's. At a point now where you're doing a lot of coaching, a lot of advising and investing, what do you hope to come from that, as opposed to when you were just trying to make a bunch of money and build an awesome company? What is it now that drives you, and what are you hoping for the future?
So I guess, at this point, it's, my brand is really well established, and I'm doing a lot of licensing deals, and I'm very interested in finding good companies to work with and advising young CEOs and trying to help them, grow their businesses and get super rich. They don't want to be super rich, right? And again, for me, the money is a scorecard, right? Obviously, I want to get equity in these deals as well. But, for me, it's like, it's very strange to walk around and like wherever I go, people have, they've seen the movie, they watch my stuff online. And the one overriding thing they always say is, oh my God, you changed my life. Like you saw this, which is such an impact on me. So it's really just about like, for me, it's just expanding on that message. Honestly, it's like, I don't look at it just in consulting with CEOs. There's so many young kids out there. When I say kids, it's like anyone under 30, right? And like they look at my life and everything I've accomplished, what I've lost, what I've been able to make back. And, for them, it represents like this unbelievable, like just sort of drive to succeed. And I feel like a responsibility from that. Like I have an awesome responsibility to make sure that they understand what the good things were, what the bad things were. And also, I believe everyone has a right and the ability to get rich. I really believe that. And I think that, the old model of going to college and, working for a corporation, I really don't believe in that anymore. I think if you listen to certain things, that if you want to be a doctor or a lawyer or some sort of degree that is required for a license, that's one thing. Engineer. But for the most part, if you want to be an entrepreneur, you just don't need to go to college. And I think that so many people are getting caught up in getting really rotten educations that are more about political correctness and insanity than in actual practical business skills to prepare them to succeed in life. So that's my goal, is just to continue to, go out there, educate more people and inspire more people around the world.
That's awesome. You do educate, you do inspire, and you are a great paragon, I would use that fancy word, of resilience, both in your story and ongoing. I want to grab that last word as both an investor in the space and someone who is heavily involved as formerly CFO and now CEO of esports, right? How did you each make a decision that this isn't just a trend? Like, how do you know this is going to be a resilient business industry that is growing and that it will continue to do this, as opposed to like, oh, it was cool and then it dropped off? Right. There are a few things where industries spike for 5 or 10 and then disappear. How do each of you decide that this is like, whether it's with esports as an example that I've thrown up there, or as people, like how do you trust that someone's going to be able to pull a 10-year journey?
I mean, if you look at the data here, this industry is, it's definitely here to stay in terms of, there's more revenue, and this is something that maybe your listeners don't know, but there's more revenue in the gaming and esports industry than in the music and movie industries combined. The amount of dollars that are spent from an investment standpoint, reaching astronomical levels. And I think from a maturity standpoint, it's still a pretty young industry. So you're right there. But I think it's really about the power of reaching this unreachable audience. And Jordan was talking about it before it crosses over with his brand, right? You talk about, I think people in the past have looked at gaming like it's just sort of 8 to 15 years old. But the 15 to 35-year-old market of males, high disposable income, they call them the untouchables or unreachables. That's really what the position that brands have been trying to reach forever, regardless of whether it's gaming or whatever, reaching that high disposable income, range, that 15 to 35. And I think that this industry reaches that audience. I think the brands are starting to realize that this isn't just about publishers who make the games making money. It's about the biggest brands in the world trying to connect with this audience. And you just need to look at the data to understand how big this industry is, right? The eyeballs that, some of these big streamers are getting from streaming from their bedroom on a Tuesday night. It's crazy, but there's still some unknowns. And that's what excites me, is unlocking those unknowns and monetizing them and being a part of shaping this industry. But I mean, the growth of this industry, I think, is undeniable.
Yeah, well, I know that one of the, you mentioned there that the gamers always grow older, right? They don't stop being gamers, they just get older. It helped me get through the pandemic. My PlayStation got dusted off and it got me through a lot of the boredom at home. Jordan, over to you. It might be part, like, I think Justin did a great job of answering both the technical and the financial reasons there. What about when you look at a business opportunity, or even, let's just say you're looking at an individual who's sitting across the desk like Justin is saying, hey, do you want to come on board? This is really cool. What do you look at an interpersonal level, at a personal level, at a professional level to say, like, I'm going to bank on this person?
Mostly it's about the person and more than the industry. Obviously, there's some industries that, lend themselves to exponential growth, right? And this rules are well known for that. So, you want to be investing in areas that are going to get much higher multiples and experience high margins typically. But it's always about the individual that you're investing in, the person that's jockeying the ship. The wrong person will destroy any company, and I don't care how great the industry, it doesn't matter. They'll wreck it. It happens all the time. It's literally the reason that 95% of businesses either only marginally succeed or fail is because they just have terrible management. It's a sad thing, but it's reality. But in terms of gaming itself, I think what people maybe don't realize so much is that the technology has come so far. The shit's almost real. It's like weird. It's like when I was 12, I think, or 11, my father brought home Pong, Coleco Pong. And it was like this, we're like, on our TV. I was like, how could this be? Like, it's unbelievable. We don't have to go to the arcade. It was like just boop, 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 boop. That was it, right? And then Breakout came out after, right? The stuff that they have out today is so intricate and so real.
Yeah.
And this is nothing compared to where it's going to be in 5 or 10 years now, VR and all the stuff. And I believe this industry is going to boom. And I think it's not even scratching the surface of what this stuff is capable of. My kid, when he was 15 years old, I was like, will you stop playing that stupid game? You're never going to get laid if you play these games. Meanwhile, now the coolest people in the world are like playing these games. It's like I really had it wrong. You know what I'm saying? I thought it was like, what are you doing? Like, what's wrong with you?
Stigma's
just stop.
The stigma's changed.
The stigma, right? Yeah. So I really believe that. And I think that there's going to be so many advances in technology. And I think that the monetization strategies are pretty clear right now, and there'll be new ones coming online. So I think this is the right industry at the right time, and I think it's getting much bigger.
Love it. Well, I want to wrap it up there and say thank you to you both. You've both shed a lot of light on some areas that some of our listeners may not be that familiar with at the top end of business. So great level of education. Both of your stories are inspiring in different ways, and you're both paragons of resilience, and really looking forward to watching the industry and yourselves individually take off from here. So appreciate you sharing your stories, your wisdom with the crowd, and look forward to keeping in touch.
Thanks, buddy. Take care.
Thanks, buddy.